It's been about 50 years since a very tall chicken farmer from Texas took a Ford and beat Ferrari at its own game, and in the process creating this car, an iconic American legend. I'm of course talking about Carroll Shelby and that 1967 GT500 Fastback. And in this classic TFL video, we're going to take the old car and compare it to the brand new GT500 and see how much they've changed over 50 years. So let's start with where we have to start, and that's the exhaust note. In this new Shelby, it's not quite as simple because you've got this button right there. In essence, you've got 4 different exhaust notes. Let me show you the loudest and the quietest. So I'm gonna start it up. And when you start it up, you are in normal mode, but you can switch that really quickly to sport. If you wanna get a little sporty, track, of course, for track work, and then quiet if you're trying to sneak in late at night and not wake your wife or the neighbors up. It's hard to describe what it's like sitting in a old GT500 Fastback, but I think it starts with the sense of smell. First, it smells like old carpet and old plastic and burnt gasoline, and that is just an intoxicating quality because it just takes you right back to, well, when I was too young to actually drive this car. But nevertheless, that's really the cool thing about old cars. They're time capsules. It's as close to a time machine as you can get, especially once you add the sound. Oh yeah, look at that, a lumpy, old school V8. Let's see how well this car is aged, because back in '67, I would have been 4 years old and actually living in the Czech Republic, so this is well beyond my expertise. But I do love this big old steering wheel. The car is much tighter, much smaller than the new car, but it goes down the road pretty well. A little bit of gas, and a lot of squeaking and rattling and what you would expect from a car that's 50 years old.
It's very clear that the first generation Mustang, the engine compartment, was not designed for an engine this big. So you look at how this is absolutely shoehorned in here, and good luck to the poor person that has to change out on the spark plugs. And I will give you a little bit of a clue. This last spark plug here, it nearly requires you to have to remove the brake master cylinder just to change the spark plug. Yep.
If you've got 4 Holley carburetors right under there.
Well, yeah, dual 4 barrels. Yep. And no, it's a fun car.
Let's give it some beans in this parking lot. That was like a quarter throttle, and those rear tires, which are, let's face it, compared to modern standards, pizza cutters, just let go. I could see why, if you had one of these back in '67, you were the king of the hill. Old school turn signal. Steers really well. Power steering, very light. Brakes are not confidence inspiring whatsoever. But that engine note is incredible. And imagine pulling up to the drag strip in this and lining up against, you know, under the hood it said FOMO, and then lining up against the Mopar, and at the time, of course, the Camaros and the Corvettes. That would have been so cool, knowing you had a big old 7-liter V8 under the hood, putting out 350 horsepower. I wonder how many of those horses have left the barn in those 50 years. Probably a lot. How does that compare to the new car? There's only one way to find out. That is to jump in the new car and take it for a ride. "52 years later, a lot has changed and a lot hasn't. So instead of wood and plastic, we've got Alcantara and carbon fiber. Instead of 3-speed shift lever, we've got a rotary dial 7-speed dual clutch. Instead of the FM radio, we have a phone and a USB port. And of course, last but not least, instead of the key, we have a push button start. That's all different. But what hasn't changed, of course, is the glorious sound of that V8 and the way you feel when you get behind the wheel, put on your sunglasses, and head on down the open road, knowing that you have the king of the hill once again, and this time in grabber green. So you may be wondering how fast it is when you floor it. I kept getting traction control there, of course, with 760 horsepower. Well, Ford says 0 to 60 in 3.3 seconds. And let's face it, that's probably the limit of rear-wheel drive adhesion. Quarter mile, 10.7 seconds. And finally, the number that Ford is very proud of is 0 to 100 to 0. 10.6 seconds. And I gotta say, even though the GT500 does not get carbon ceramic brakes, as I found out.
Carbon ceramic, although it has a lot of benefits in terms of unsprung mass and rotating weight and all the rest of that stuff, the fade performance between what we're seeing on the steel and the carbon ceramic really isn't that big of a difference. Plus the cost to replace the carbon ceramics, if you're actually going to use it as consumable, is really, really high. So for our customer, who we feel does a lot more track days, it's really a better option overall without any sacrifice in performance, to be honest.
It does stop really well, so perhaps the added expense of going carbon ceramic is not worth the extra stopping distance. But it does have very solid brakes. Can you believe it? 760 horsepower and 625 pound-foot of torque out of a 5.2 liter engine. When I was growing up, this would have been like a V20 to get that kind of horsepower. And yet, because of this massive Eaton supercharger, this vehicle puts out, well, more power than a Hellcat. That's only 707 horsepower. I mean, look at the supercharger. It's the size of my forearm. I mean, look how massive that is. And just like an AMG Mercedes, every GT500 has a hand-built engine. And the guy who built it, his name is right on top, so I guess that's a good thing. Or if you're Chris, in the case of our car, if this engine goes kablooey, we know who to blame. Cool thing about drag racing is it's pretty bulletproof. So the question is, can I get into the 10s? Oh yeah! That is fun! You get a little bit of tunnel vision? Yeah! Anything under 4 seconds, when there's enough G's to kind of push you back and the world just kind of narrows into this one small slit, then you know you've got a fast car, and this is indeed a fast car. Is it 3.30 to 60? Yeah, I bet it is 3.30 to 60. But you probably need to be at sea level under ideal conditions with somebody that is much lighter than me. Let's say Tommy. 11.491, but look at the speed. 130 miles an hour. So how do you put down 760 horsepower to the ground? Well, you're rolling on 20. Specifically, these are Michelin Sport Cup 2s, 315/30s. That's a wide tire.
So the street tire is a Michelin PS4S. The track tire is, of course, a Pilot Sport Cup 2. Obviously, tread pattern differences for the GT500 versus the GT500 track pack. There are compounding differences between the two. The tread's a bit thicker on the GT500 than it is on the GT500 track pack. The track pack tire, because of the thinner tread, is a little bit stiffer, maybe a little bit more responsive. It sheds heat a little bit better on the track. There's, of course, a couple of trade-offs on that for on the road, which the PS4S doesn't have, although it's it's still a really, really good track tire, and actually it's a phenomenal drag tire.
If you're going to have a performance car, you need performance seats. That's why Recaros are optional in the GT500, and they do hold you in place. But if you're like me, a big guy, probably just a little too much. If you go for the Recaros, it's going to cost you more, and you're going to get a little bit less. You're not going to get things like, well, heated seats, but you are going to get a pretty cool looking seat that is very pinchy for big guys like me. So here's the question, guys. How many of you are actually going to take this on a racetrack? I'm betting more of you will go on the drag strip than on the racetrack, but when you get a chance to take a GT500 on the racetrack, you got to go for it. So let's see how this bad boy performs when the speeds get a little faster. The cool thing about this car is it does get smaller around you, which is really nice. The faster you go, the smaller it gets. Still a big, heavy car though. Instant throttle response, supercharger, doesn't take a lot to wind up, is nice. Tight turn, car holds it, feels really strong. 100, 120, 130. Pretty good. Well, there you have it. I caught up to the car in front of me and I can't pass him. Probably my favorite thing about this car, though, by far, is the transmission. It's just always in the right gear. Combine that with the brakes that just pull your eyes out, and you've got a hell of a track weapon here. A hell of a track weapon. Here it is. The 7-speed dual-clutch transmission by Tremec that was specifically developed for the GT500. Ford and Tremec say it'll shift in 80 milliseconds, which is much faster than any of us can actually push a clutch. So if you're jonesing for a manual, there's always a GT350. With this car on its side, let's talk about the things that are normally hidden that make it go fast. First and foremost are these 4-mode, 4-inch, 4 active exhausts. I mean, look at that. That just screams horsepower. Then you've got your rear axle oil cooler. You've got your diffuser right here. But this is really interesting. I especially like this. You've got dual high flow pumps in the fuel tank. In other words, there's 2 fuel pumps. So when you're going around that corner and the fuel slushes to one side, you're not starving the massive engine of gasoline. You've got a transmission oil pump integrated into the transmission, once again keeping that transmission nice and oiled when you're going around a track. And then you've got things like structural high capacity gated oil pan. I can show you the inside of that. It's got little valves that keep the oil where it should be, as opposed to sloshing around and starving the engine for oil. And finally, there are 6, 7 intercoolers on this GT500 to keep everything nice and cool. And Ford will tell you that you will run out of fuel before you will overheat the engine, sending it into limp home mode. The GT500 weighs about 4,200 pounds, so you would think this oil pan, which has these valves that I was talking about, you can see them right there, kind of one-way valves, would be super heavy, but it's not. It's aluminum, probably weighs 15, 20 pounds. And that's how Ford gets a 4,200 pound car around the track so quickly. All right, here we go. Second time. Here we go. Took a little bit of time. Oh, I love that. Oh my God, that is so much fun. All right, there you have it. That was the most fun I've had today. Now, that last run was 11.3. Trying to get into the 10s, but we've learned something very important. The difference between a 1967 GT500 with 350 horsepower originally and this brand new one is about 5 seconds at the drag strip. Here's the magic of the new GT500. Just like that original 67 car, when you park it, you can't help but look over your shoulder and think to yourself, wow, that is a sexy beast. Look at the wheels. Look at that grille. Look at those hood scoops. Yeah, that's the magic of this car. It makes you feel special, not only behind the wheel, but standing here looking at the car. You may be wondering, how does this compare to the Charger Challenger twins? It's a very different car. Those, of course, are based on sedans, 4 doors, big trunk, lots of room, very American. This is more tight, sportier, a little bit more focused on track duty versus open road duty. All right, I brought up the Charger Challenger twins, so we have to talk about the back seat. Did you know that you can actually delete the back seat option in this car if you really want less weight? But let's see what the back seat's like, because at some point somebody's gonna get back here and I might as well be the guinea pig. Oh, see, this is why you want the other seats, because these are all manual. Let's see what it's like back here. You know what? This car doesn't have rear seats, so it's not very comfortable. Sometimes when you get in a very fast car, you feel like it's driving you, but in this car, you're definitely driving it. It's very easy to go very fast, perhaps too easy. Now that could, of course, be just my opinion, because last time I was on this track, I was flogging around an F-150, so the benchmark was set pretty low, but nevertheless, I'm impressed. I just feel that maybe people who buy this car won't actually realize what a track weapon they have, because so few people will take it on the track, but you know what? You should. The GT500, if you can get your hands on one without a dealer markup, starts at about $73,000, and you can option this thing up to almost $110,000 if you go for the very expensive options, and we should talk about those. First and foremost is this carbon fiber package. That's $18,000 and gets you the big old carbon fiber wing and the wheels, of course. But the more interesting one, I think, are these stripes. Now, these stripes are stickers, and they're $1,000, which isn't too bad. But let me show you the other one. Now, this car has the optional painted on stripe, and you can tell by running your finger across it that there's no ridge. It is a $10,000 option, and unlike the sticker, you better like this one because it's not coming off. During this video, have you been wondering how much both of those cost? Well, if you got the classic Mustang Shelby GT500 and it was perfect show condition, about $275,000, but that running condition, about $110,000. The GT500, that one is $95,000, but you figure there's going to be a dealer markup, so might just be about $110,000 as well. So you're looking at two cars that are 50 years apart, and today probably cost about the same, if you can get them. As always, this is Roman reporting for the Fast Lane Car. Check out tflcar.com for more news, views, and old versus new reviews. See you guys next time. Ciao.